Hello everyone, my name is Rob, welcome to Kinetic Rugby League. In this video I'll be giving you my Super League Round 11 power rankings. So there's going to be a few changes towards the middle and towards the top as well after some more interesting results this weekend. But we'll just crack on with 12th place. So starting in 12th place and moving down one I have Hull FC. Very simply for me, they lost the team that was below them in the power rankings originally. And I'll get into a bit more detail when I move on to 11th place and kind of justify the change a little bit more then. But one of the key reasons being that the gap between 11th and 12th wasn't that big. I think Hull FC, over the last couple of weeks, or at least when they played against Leeds, and then to be fair, some parts against Warrington, there was a little bit of life in that team. There wasn't really any structure though, it was just a very depressing, very dull rugby. They didn't really offer much, except for a lot of energy. Energy's great, but there wasn't really a lot of structure and competence that came with it. So those two performances kept me, made me keep London below. But yeah, Hull FC, after the last result, certainly need to move down. But when I move on to 11th place, there's a few more things to go into. So moving on to 11th place and moving up one, I have London Broncos. Hooray for them. The second time that they've moved up a place. One thing to keep in mind is that there was a sin bin during that game. So a lot of people will look at that, and my main counter to that is if you remove the points that London scored during that 10-minute period, they still win the game. They put up 12 points. So you can take 12 points off London, they still win the game. And that's basically the main reason why they've moved up. I think it was very likely for me to keep them below. If it was a close result, I actually don't think I would have moved London up. And the main reason for that is that London's results have still been absolutely shocking. And as I mentioned, Hull's performances against Leeds and Warrington weren't so astronomically poor. Like, they were still bad, but I don't think London would have even come that close or offered that much. London, even against Leeds, were demolished. So both of these could easily be swapped around, and I'm kind of just, for the sake of it, swapping them. Both don't really matter in the equation this season, but I think just because London won this one, as of right now, technically it's fair to move them up. But over the last couple of weeks, yeah, both teams are still extremely poor. Moving on to 10th place now, and still in 10th place, I have the Castleford Tigers. I'd been high on them the last couple of weeks, really backing them to do well. Was hoping that they could put in at least a respectable effort this last weekend, but not to be at all. I think they'll still have their moments. They'll still struggle against a lot of teams, but I think there's still more to come from them. I don't think they're down and out completely. There's life in that team. Tex Hoy is still going to be instrumental in helping them to improve and look more effective, especially on the attacking side. And they'll work some things out. They'll get there. They'll be okay. I don't think they'll ever drop into that bottom two. I can't see that happening for the rest of the season. I don't think they'll ever look unsure of themselves. Just in terms of when I say drop into the bottom two, I mean in the power rankings and in the standings as well. I think they'll be okay. There's still plenty of things to work on. Defensively, they're still shocking. But based on where they were at the start of the season, they're okay. They're not terrible compared to how it was, but they're still okay. Moving on to 9th place now, and still in 9th place, I have the Leeds Rhinos. They definitely could have moved down a place. Definitely could have moved down if it weren't for Castleford's catastrophic display against, say, Helens. Leeds are ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous. I feel like the team that we saw earlier on this season is so far gone. And they were a decent team. They were as high as third at one point in these power rankings. I don't see any way of this team turning things around. I really don't. And Leeds fans, any Leeds fans watching this, are probably crying out saying, well, that's because Rowan Smith needs to go. And they might be right. That change might have to be made. But then the question is, do you put up with the rest of the season being poor in the hopes that you bring in the right person at the right time, like when they're available? Or do you just go and get anyone, or just let the backroom staff deal with it? Like, what's the plan? What do you then do? But Leeds in defence are all over the place, and they have no control in attack. Absolutely none. It is abysmal. Absolutely poor. It's pretty sad to see. What is the answer? It might just be Smith out. That might be the only thing they can do. But yeah, they don't look like they're that far off joining that bottom three or sinking into it. And by the end of the season, I don't know if they'll be anywhere near playoffs. But Leeds Rhinos still in 9th. Moving on to 8th place now, and moving down one, I have the Huddersfield Giants. I gave them a little bit of credit. I thought, you know what? They'll be fine against Wigan. I didn't think they'd win, but I just thought they'd hold their own. It'd be clear that Wigan would be favourites. They'd just be the better team. I thought it'd be fine to a degree. And something that Giants fans would think, it's okay. We can accept that. Wigan's a tough team. But no, just nowhere to be seen. Completely obliterated. They're just so inconsistent. They're such a weird team. I still get the feeling that they'll fight for playoffs towards the end of the year. But again, I'm just going to be repeating the same thing every week. We don't know which Giants team we're going to get. They have been slightly downward the last couple of weeks, so they've been consistently bad. Let's put it that way. There's still a team in there that can surprise teams, that can throw up problems. But it's going to be a tough second half to the season. I mean, we're not quite at the halfway mark yet, but I can't really place them because they have their good days and bad days. Bad days are far too frequent compared to the good ones, but yeah, they are a bit of a mess, but their highs are just frequently enough and just high enough that it keeps them in that playoff conversation at the moment. Moving on to 7th place and also moving down one, I have Salford Red Devils. They just also collapsed. I backed them. So the story, if you've not been keeping up with it, is, the last 2 weeks I went against Salford and they won. And then I thought, not again. Nah, not again. Especially with how Leigh played over the last couple of weeks. They'd been solid and I thought that Leigh would put in a solid performance. But then, just based on everything, I just thought I'd back Salford, and then no. They just thought, no, we're not having that. Don't you dare predict us to win this game. We'll show you. And they showed me indeed. So thanks for that, Salford. So, future reference, whatever I predict for Salford, just go with the opposite from now on. They are a little bit like Huddersfield as well. Very inconsistent, a very weird team. I still think they'll fight for playoffs towards the end of the season. But I don't know. There's just a few teams in limbo. Every team's weird this season. There's not a lot of technical stuff that I can go into. Every team's weird. And I think Salford's a team that's probably still learning a bit. New spine and all that. But yeah, I've said this before, but at what point do you accept that they've had long enough? I don't know. Defensively, they still have their problems. They can compete with a lot of teams. But yeah, I don't know. I think Salford, the same with Huddersfield, are just some of the teams that they're just a clear representation or a perfect representation of what this season's been, which is all over the place. Moving on to 6th place now and moving up to the Leigh Leopards. This is the highest I've been on Leigh so far in the power rankings. They have been really strong over the last month and a half. That flurry of strong performances probably kick-started from the Challenge Cup loss against Hull KR. Obviously a loss isn't great, but performance-wise it was gritty. They caused some issues, that Hull KR defence at times. It was a real tough performance for them to get through. So Leigh, they picked up from there, put in some good efforts against Warrington, especially against Catalans as well. They're picking up at the moment. I think they're still the same kind of feeling team-wise as Salford and Huddersfield. A bit inconsistent, but they're finding a little bit more form. They're taking on tougher opponents and competing at a higher level, and then demolishing Salford like that. I've got to put them above them. So the last three teams, including Leigh, are all a bit inconsistent. But as of right now, the two below them have just been on a slight decline. Salford not as much, but Leigh, they've just been a lot stronger. And yeah, given that they battered Salford, I've got to move them above, because the gap wasn't that big anyway. So yeah, it just made sense to move them up too. I think they can keep going once they're, everyone's at full fitness. There might still be players with nagging injuries at the moment, but an extra week off with the Challenge Cup coming up will help them. Just players rest and recover, focus on the next round, and then I think once they play more of the top teams later on through the season, I think they'll have everything sorted and they'll be a firm playoff team. Moving on to 5th place now, and still in 5th place, I have the Warrington Wolves. If you watched my post-match reaction video on TikTok, you would have seen that I was very high on Warrington's performance against Hull KR. Sorry, I remembered the KR. I was very high on Warrington's performance, especially the first 30 minutes. So as a Wire fan, it's easier for me to go into more detail because I just pay more attention. So I'll repeat a lot of what I said from that TikTok video, is that the first 30 minutes for Warrington against Hull KR was up there, possibly top 5 all-time performances I've seen. Just that 30-minute section. I'm not talking about the whole game, just that 30 minutes. And a few reasons for that. Number one, if we focus on the errors in that 30-minute span. There was a knock-on from Thulis down the right-hand side after about 4 minutes, and a knock-on from Ashton down the left-hand side after about 14 minutes. And they came off flick passes from their centres. And they're quite difficult to get right a lot of the times. You have to get it accurately and on time. So for them to knock on those kind of passes that were a bit wayward after intentionally going at Hull KR, trying to play around them, I'm okay with those. They don't bother me in the slightest. I can forgive them. And I guess there was an error or a knock-on from Drinkwater in the in-goal area when there was it looked like it should have been a goal line dropout, but yeah, it ended up being a 20-metre restart. There were the only 3 errors in 30 minutes, and all 3 of those are entirely forgivable. I have no anger towards those or disappointment towards those in any way, shape or form. And it wasn't until Zane Musgrove tried to offload the ball with 3 or 4 men in the tackle that reign came to an end. That reign of perfect play came to an end. The speed through the middle, the lack of errors was just so enjoyable to watch, because I am so high on discipline and handling and intent, and all 3 of those were perfect in that first 30 minutes. And also, Hull KR didn't have a single play the ball in our 20-metre zone for 20 minutes. 20 minutes. Not a single play the ball in our 20-metre zone. Not one. And then not an error for 30 minutes, or at least a genuine error. So that performance for the first 30 minutes alone was enough for me to want to move Warrington up. The second half, we started getting away from what worked from us, which was spreading the ball, attacking that right edge, especially with Roderick Ty. So we made a lot of the meters down the right, and then in our own half, made a lot of the meters down the left and right. Through the middle of the park, made a lot of them through the right, and then finished off those attacks down the left-hand side. And we We still tried to go at them a little bit on the edges, but I think we focused mainly on going through the middle, and it took a lot of sting out of what we originally brought, which was making them worry about us going around them. And they played quite narrow a little bit in the first half defensively, but yeah, it's really strong performance from Warrington. I will obviously get into the reasons why they haven't moved above certain teams, because it would require Hull KR moving down even more so than they potentially have done, but we'll get on to 4th place. So moving on to 4th place and moving down to, I have Hull Kingston Rovers. Maybe a little bit unfortunate given the results that they've had over the last couple of weeks. Because, you look at the opponents they've played in the last 4 weeks. It was Catalans, then Wigan, then Saints, then Warrington. You couldn't have asked anyone to have a tougher start. And I thought London's start to the season was tough. But at this period in the season, to have that run of games is ridiculous. But the fact that they've won 2 out of 4 in that time is really solid. My biggest concerns and main reasons why I'm moving them down too. So first of all, their performance was poor. Really poor. As I said, they didn't have a single play the ball in Warrington's 20-metre zone for 20 minutes. You just can't do that. They struggle to get out their own end. Defensively on the edges were very shaky and a lot of very easy meters, and the kicking game from them just wasn't effective whatsoever. The timing and positioning was just really poor. There was a strong effort in the second half. They used now levels a lot more and attacked Warrington's edges, but it just was too little too late, unfortunately. They're still a really strong team, but the 2 main reasons why I've moved them down is that performance against Warrington was poor, so it probably would have justified a move down 1 based on other teams' results as well. Plus, the performance against Catalans was so far off. There's a little bit of that still lingering. That was only a few games ago. But I don't think I could have justified moving them as far down as 5th because of their performances against Wigan and Saints. I think there's still the chance that they could have only moved down 1 or maybe stayed where they were. But it's mainly because of the other team's performances in comparison to Hull KR's this last week that they've had to move down to. But I couldn't justify 3 places. So moving on to 3rd place now, and moving up 1, I have the Catalans Dragons. It's always going to be commended when you hold a team to 0. And as much as I'm low on Leeds at the moment, they still have individuals that can punish you. So the fact that they held them to 0, when their defence has been known to kind of get out of shape a little bit, and Leeds play off the cuff at times, so to not let that ruin a perfect result, fair play, needs to be commended. I don't have too much to say on Catalans other than I think they're probably the shakiest of the top teams. They're still clearly one of the best teams. I think they're comfortable against the bottom 3, bottom 4. They'll have some shaky performances against the midfield, and then against the top, I don't really know what we're going to get. I actually trust them more against the other top teams than I do against the midfield teams, for some reason. Because I think once they sort out their consistency, given how things have been going for Saints and Wigan as well, Catalans could go top of the power rankings at some point. They've got the quality. Defensively, they're excellent. In attack, a little bit up and down at times, but they get some consistency, they'll be in the number 1 spot. I'm sure of it. Moving on to 2nd place now, and moving up 1, St Helens. They dropped down last week after their performance against Hull KR. It is possible, as I mentioned in the Hull KR section, that they could have stayed where they were. So Saints could have still been below Hull KR, but just based on the results last week, they were so far apart in terms of quality that it just felt completely justified to move Saints back up. And especially dealing with losing a player so early and still being so dominant, the whole game. Where's that come from? This is a team that's had some struggles, to say the least. It's still been clearly a superior team compared to most at times. And then they're sort of working their way down a little bit, and then out of nowhere, they just do that. Where has that come from? And this is against a team that was on the up. This is against a Castleford team that's on the up. And it's not just like... If Castleford got the red card early on, it makes sense. It seems justifiable. But to be the ones to lose the player early on and dominate after that, you've got to move up. Simple as that, you've got to move up. I don't know where it came from. I didn't know they still had that in their locker, but fair play to them. Incredible result. St Helens up 1. Finally in first place, and still in first place, I have the Wigan Warriors. Very simply, demolished Huddersfield. I thought that they would throw up a bit of a challenge. They'd be, a tough team to handle. I thought they'd be okay, but they'd, be difficult. No, nice and easy. No issues there. We'll be alright. We'll get a sin bin in the first minute and still dominate as well. Same with St Helens. This is the kind of result from Wigan and Saints that we would have expected a few years back when they were a bit more dominant, and maybe last year as well from Wigan especially. But they'd lost that edge. But this feels normal of them over the last couple of years, but feels very irregular from this season. But fair play to them. Fair play to them. Both of them have had a tricky couple of weeks. Have played some tough opponents, had some tough games. But what a way to turn things around. The question now is, are they going to show that level of consistency for the next couple of weeks? They will have some more tough games in there. They will be beaten again. But can they maintain that? Or at least that degree of potency and defensive quality? I don't know. But it was a hell of a result. So that's going to be it for my Super League Round 11 power rankings. If you have your own list, do let me know in the comments down below. Have I left anything out? Have I been unfair about any teams? Do let me know. But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.